Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And a good Monday morning to you. It is Monday, August 17th, 2026, the feast of St. Clare of Montefalco, also known as St. Clare of the Cross. A little bit more about this wonderful saint who was born and is buried in Umbria, in her hometown, in a minute or so. First, I want to give you the weather and the rundown for the show today. We are going to start off, as we always do on a Monday, with our wonderful segment with our very own Matt Swaim, our Journey Home Highlights. Every Monday he joins us. If you're a new listener and not familiar with our Monday lineup, he joins us right after the news and the weather to talk about the evening program on Mondays on EWTN television, The Journey Home. And it's a fantastic segment that we do because he highlights, as the title of the segment indicates, what's coming up, but doesn't give it all away. Leaves something to the imagination to encourage you to tune in, and it'll be exciting, I'm sure. And then we have two segments with the one, the only Bill Donahue, the president of the Catholic League. There was a report that came out late last week. It was released through the Department of Health and Human Services, and it is really crucial that we all take a look at this, at least look at the summary. Maybe you don't have time to read the entire 64-page report, but the report is called Wolves in White Coats, okay? And there are a number of key findings of this report. So the scale of the programs, the financial impact, and most of all, the young people who were victimized and are still being victimized by those who call themselves doctors, most of whom, according to this report, are pressuring young children. And one of the stories talks about a young person feeling like they were sitting in front of a used car salesperson in terms of the pressure they were putting on them to make the decision to have this mutilating surgery that would change their lives forever. So we're going to talk to Bill Donahue about this, and we'll also take a look at the fraud that the HHS says has occurred within this industry of so-called transgender surgeries, or as the left calls it very inappropriately, gender-affirming care. Another twist on the language. So Bill will be with us for two segments on that. And then we have our very own Gail Buckley and our scripture verse of the week. Looking forward to that. A beautiful verse today. Of course, all scripture is beautiful, but this one I found very, very comforting. Psalm 131:2, but I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child in its mother's arms. And it's beautiful. We think about, of course, over the weekend celebrating the feast of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Hour number 2 for our 2 cents segment after we give you the news and the weather, of course, which we do all the time, every day, Monday through Friday. I found this a very funny clip. There's this woman online. She has a website. She has a vlog. She's on TikTok and other social media outlets, and she's very creative and very clever. She's a sister in the Lord. She loves Jesus. She loves him so much, and she loves truth. And her videos are very clean, no bad language or anything like that, but they're very funny because they actually make fun of people who are so ridiculous in terms of their approach to these issues. And she points it out. So, for example, because we're going to continue the conversation in hour number 2 regarding this whole nonsense with the WNBA and its failure last week to have a meeting, and they couldn't decide how to describe a woman, even though it's right there in their bylaws in terms of women play in the WNBA. We'll get more into detail on that. But this is an hysterical video. It's really cute. We're going to play the audio for you. And this woman, this conservative mama, she plays all the characters. And so if you're watching it, she'll don a different wig for the different people. For example, she was pretending that she was having the meeting for the WNBA. Now, I'm playing this to highlight the ridiculousness and the idiocy of these people on these extreme leftist issues, and how when you try to pin them down on the reality of the situation, there's nowhere to go because there's no truth in what they're saying. And so we'll look at that in 2 cents. And then we're going to talk to Samantha Kelly. She's been with us before. She's the president of FIERCE, and it's a wonderful Catholic organization for women in athletics. And she has a lot to say on this whole situation with the WNBA and the transathlete debate. So we'll talk about that with a wonderful representative of women's sports, especially Catholic women in sports. Samantha Kelly will be joining us to wrap up hour number 2. All right, let's take a look at the forecast. We have areas of gusty winds, heavy rain leading to flash flooding, and high surf continues. This is for portions of Hawaii. Tropical storm Lala continues to move away from the islands. Closer to home, we have severe thunderstorms and heavy rainfall shifting into the southern Appalachians. That'll happen today. And then we have strong to severe thunderstorms producing large hail, scattered wind gusts, and heavy rain across the northern and central plains. And by the way, our saint of the day, as I mentioned, is St. Clair of Montefalco. And she's an amazing witness for us. And she often experienced ecstasy that would last for several weeks. And she would be sustained by her fellow Augustinian nuns feeding her sugar water. During the ecstasy, one of them, she had a vision of our Lord implanting a cross in her heart. And after her death in the early 14th century, her heart was opened, and in it they found fibrous tissue forming a cross and the instrument of the Lord's passion. Now, I've seen the relics. It's in Umbria, about an hour from where Deacon Dom and I reside part-time. Her incorrupt relics, including her heart, where you can still see the cross, reside at the Sanctuary of the Holy Cross in Montefalco. She was canonized in 1881 by Pope Leo XIII in the town of Montefalco, by the way, located, as I mentioned, in Umbria, about a 45-minute drive from Perugia. Now, that area of Italy is gorgeous. Obviously, Umbria is a very pretty place. And they're also known in Montefalco for their red wines, particularly their Sagrantino reds. St. Clair of Montefalco, pray for us. It is 6 minutes past the hour now, running a little late. A lot to discuss with you before we get started, but let's do that right now. It's 6 minutes past the hour. Check the news for you on a Monday here on EWTN. Well, officials in Indiana say at least 7 people ranging in age from 4 to 86 are now dead after storms caused flash flooding across that state. Maggie Vespa reporting that evacuees in Indianapolis have been returning to their flooded homes to see the damage.
Johnny Green just gave up his flood insurance after paying off his home. He's injured and unable to work right now.
I've been off work now 6 weeks and I haven't had a paycheck, and short-term disability hasn't kicked in.
But it seems like everyone needs help.
Everybody needs help, not just me.
A record amount of rain causing streams and rivers to flood their banks across the state last week, leading the governor, Mike Braun, to request a presidential emergency declaration, which the president has now granted. And Perry Williams tells us several Illinois suburban leaders in areas south of Chicago are demanding federal aid, this following damage from a recent severe storm in their area.
Lansing Mayor Brian Hardy describes the destruction in his community.
I don't care what block you go down, you're going to see destruction. You're going to see trees and homes, uprooted trees, sidewalks, streets, curbs, infrastructure that's damaged.
Mayor Hardy added that his city is still recovering from a July tornado before the latest storms hit. Meanwhile, Flossmoor Mayor Michelle Nelson says the recovery is slow and help is much needed from the federal government. I'm Perry Williams.
Amtrak reopening an East River tunnel in New York today that it's been shut for Superstorm Sandy related repairs and caused disruptions for daily riders. Amtrak says a more than a century-old tunnel has been modernized and rebuilt after it was out of action since May of last year. The tunnel closed and it forced disruptions for New Jersey Transit and Long Island Railroad riders. Work is expected to start on another Amtrak tunnel damaged by Sandy this fall. And Lisa Taylor tells us the National Weather Service says Hurricane Lala has weakened after a death has been reported in Hawaii.
Lala has now been downgraded to a tropical storm with sustained winds of 70 miles per hour and is slowly moving past Hawaii's Big Island. Morgan Chesky is in Hilo.
We know that Oahu and Kauai could see its impact late Sunday and into Monday. The biggest threat here remains that potential for absolutely devastating flash floods.
Thousands of customers are without power across the state. Hawaii Governor Josh Green said Saturday he's urging residents to stay off the roads after a terrible car accident that caused a fatality in hurricane-force winds on the Big Island. I'm Lisa Taylor.
The memorandum of understanding that was supposed to put a pause on fighting between the U.S. and Iran does expire today. That deal was reached back in June after high-level talks mediated by Pakistan. There's little evidence that either side wants to extend the agreement. Both sides have accused the other of violating the terms of the deal multiple times. The deal is aimed to put a pause on fighting and to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, lift a U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports, and end the war between Israel and Lebanon. Both the U.S. and Iran have said they are winning the war, and ceasefire has had little impact. Traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, a critical oil corridor, remains well below pre-war levels. And President Trump is directing the Pentagon to scale back joint military exercises with South Korea. Nick Harper reporting Trump made the announcement in a Truth Social post.
He says that it's costly, but he also says it sends a signal that is totally inappropriate and hostile to North Korea, who he says has always been unthreatening and respectful. He says it's too late to cancel the joint exercises, but he's asked Pete Hegseth to substantially reduce them.
Trump also criticizing South Korea's position on the conflict involving Iran. Following the Angelus on Sunday, the Holy Father once again calling for an end to the repeated acts of violence against the Palestinian population of the West Bank. The Holy Father adding an urgent appeal to the international community to ensure, he said, that progress is made toward a two-state solution for a just and lasting peace. The Holy See has consistently, it says, affirmed its position that the two-state solution based on secure and internationally recognized borders is the only viable and equitable path toward a just and lasting peace in the Holy Land, as noted by Archbishop Kasha in an address to the UN in July of last year. And during Mass in Castel Gandolfo for the solemnity of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, Pope Leo, marveling how the Blessed Virgin Mary, through God's grace, leads us all toward heaven, insisting that love is humanity's most beautiful adornment, stressing that it transfigures, transforms, and lifts us up, making us light, free, and closer to God, even amid the ups and downs of life. The solemnity, the Holy Father recalled that the Magisterium of the Church teaches us that Mary, having completed the course of her earthly life, was assumed, body and soul, into heavenly glory, and points out to us in this mystery the fulfillment of the most perfect grace that God bestowed upon her at her Immaculate Conception. In other news, Daria Albinger tells us a former flight attendant has now started his annual 9/11 remembrance.
You see just about everything in New York City, but this could be a first. A flight attendant pushing a beverage cart down the street in Lower Manhattan. That's what Paul Veneto is going to do September 11th. The retired flight attendant has begun his annual trek to Ground Zero in what's known as Paulie's Push. He started in Boston and will travel 220 miles through 60 cities and towns in memory of those who died on 9/11 and everyone who was impacted by the attacks. Veneto says he made a promise, as many did, never to forget after 9/11, and this is his way of honoring it. He's joined by airline crew members across much of the journey. In New York, I'm Daria Albinger.
A Maryland company is voluntarily recalling soup kits sold at Walmart over listeria concerns. Kettle Cuisine LLC announcing the recall of its 14-ounce soup kits. That, according to the FDA, the recall impacts select Walmart stores in a number of states, including Maryland, Virginia, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, North Carolina, and West Virginia. And finally, in our news segment at almost 9:13 Eastern Time, an AI agent running a San Francisco store has fired a human employee. Andon Labs says that Luna, the AI manager of Andon Market, an experimental retail store run entirely by AI, decided to fire a human employee, this after repeated lateness and other workplace issues. Logs apparently showing that employee who was fired arriving late for 17 of 23 shifts. So there you go. Interesting. It is a Monday morning. We'll be right back with our very own Matt Swaim from the Sunrise Morning Show with our Journey Home highlights. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned. Hope we're having a great Monday. We love Mondays because we have our very own Matt Swaim from the Sunrise Morning Show and, of course, the Coming Home Network and the Journey Home program with us every Monday to talk about our Journey Home highlights. Okay, so tell us about our guest tonight, TJ Nielsen, is it?
Yeah, TJ Nielsen, actually, he co-hosts a podcast called the Bone Church Revival Podcast with Father Jonathan Duncan, who is on the Sunrise Morning Show every Friday to preview the Sunday Mass readings. So we were excited to get TJ on to tell his story. But TJ comes from a very strong Christian family. Never was a time when he didn't believe in God. His dad actually ran a Christian school.
Oh, wow.
And so there's this thing that sometimes happens when you are a strong Christian kid reading your Bible all the time. You think you have a lot figured out. But in one of his Christian classes, there was this thing about like, okay, what do we need to do to put together a church service? What are the essential components we ought to have? And this is a question that interested TJ because he loved God and he loved the Bible, but he felt like there was something missing from church, like we could be doing this better. And this one kid in the class said, the sacraments. And TJ was like, the what? He had never heard this word before as like a high school Christian kid. And it was this like sort of, it was this curiosity sparked in him, but also this kind of embarrassment. Like he thought he knew everything there was to know about Christianity as this strong Christian kid going to a Christian school. And I can't tell you how many times that's happened to people I know on the journey who are strong Christians, and they hear this happen, and they're like, "What? Run that word by me again."
Yeah.
There was another person I wish I could remember who their friend became Catholic, and they're like, "Why on earth did you become Catholic?" We're like, "Well, we felt drawn to the Eucharist," and they were like, "The what?
What's that?"
The what? So, at any rate, TJ, that was a big. It was a massive kind of like sense that he thought he knew everything there was to know about what it meant to be a Christian, and he kind of, in that moment, began to realize I maybe know just a sliver of it. And yeah, that's sometimes one of the biggest things that has to happen is sort of this intellectual humility. Like there's way more to this Christianity thing than me and my group of people at my Christian school or my Christian church or my Bible study. That maybe we're the small minority of Christians throughout history and around the globe. So yeah, that was a thing that shook TJ a little bit.
Sometimes, Catholics can be like that too, and then we're comfortable.
sure.
We go to Mass, maybe we're in a Bible study. Once in a while we go to a conference. We only tip our toes in the water. We don't really go in deep head first and really discover this whole other amazing, deep, beautiful world of Catholicism.
Well, think about how many Catholic groups came over as immigrants and were sort of ghettoized, and they had a very strong Italian Catholic experience or a very strong Irish Catholic experience,
right?
Or a very strong Polish Catholic experience, but didn't have kind of the other kinds of Catholic experience. It's funny, there are places in the Cincinnati area and Diocese of Covington, I'm sure Detroit too, where you got the old Irish Catholic church across the street from the Italian Catholic church. But in Protestantism, it's a much bigger kind of divide because it's not like each Protestant at the Eucharistic prayers is saying, for Robert our Bishop and Leo our Pope,
right,
during the prayers at Mass. There just isn't. Well, anyway, TJ goes on to Hillsdale College and finds that there's this whole other realm of church history he didn't know about either. And so history is a big part of it. But one of the interesting obstacles in TJ's journey is that a few years before he went to Hillsdale, his older brother went to Hillsdale College and converted to Catholicism. And so one of the biggest obstacles to conversion in TJ's life was he didn't want to become Catholic because that would look like he was admitting his older brother was right. So there is this kind of like, people are like, well, what's the main thing that keeps people from becoming Catholic? I'm like, sometimes it's like you don't want to admit your older brother is right.
Right. But what's interesting is that he met, according to when we were going back and forth with our emails, he met a strong Catholic and an encounter with more than one serious Catholics at Hillsdale, right?
Well, yeah, and it's actually a thing. There are a lot of people who end up at Hillsdale, and because they want to explore the rich tradition of what it means to be a Christian in the world.
Right, it's a great school. Yeah,
you're gonna have to encounter the people who built Christian civilization, who built Western civilization. You're going to have to encounter everybody from the monks of Ireland to Thomas Aquinas to the Counter-Reformation folks like Charles Borromeo and Robert Bellarmine. You're going to have to figure out how the world survived when Rome fell, and in order to do that research, you're going to have to study St. Benedict and the monks. You're just going to have to encounter that sort of thing.
It's interesting because sometimes, and you know this because you talk to so many, I'm sure maybe you even ask yourself this question, you're coming into the church. I often hear some of our Protestant brothers and sisters say, well, Catholics got some of it right, but then they just kind of went on the wrong path, and that's why we needed the Reformation.
Well, we did need a Reformation, Teresa, and we got one through Robert Bellarmine and Charles Borromeo and Ignatius of
Saint
Loyola
Francis
and
de
Teresa of
Sales.
Avila. The list goes on.
Right.
So, but again, these are the people are still reading Teresa of Avila in 2026. People aren't busting out the works of John Huss in 2026 and being like, man, this is great spiritual wisdom. Like, people don't even remember that guy from the Reformation. It is interesting what has endured. But, again, with this question of Hillsdale, and I can speak to this from my own experience, you look back at history and you're like, well, it appears that all these Christians for 1,500 years believed in the Eucharist and that baptism does something to you and all these other things. But acknowledging that Christians believed that for 1,500 years and saying, I believe it too, are two different things. And so he talks a little bit about that as well. Like, it's one thing to discover what the early church believed. It's another thing to say, well, I think the early church was right in believing this.
Well, how about the Feast of the Assumption and the dogma of the Assumption, which wasn't technically approved until 1950, but I actually read it. I went over on Saturday, because of the feast, and I went through it again, and all the different saints that are quoted in that document in terms of why this is doctrine and how long that the church believed that before they actually proclaimed the dogma in the 20th century. And then it hit me, and the Pope was talking about in the actual write-up all the art that shows us the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary long before 1950, in the Renaissance and other areas. And having seen that art so many times, I never even thought of it. I was just thinking of mine as a modern-day Catholic. The Assumption was always with me. I was born in 1959, and it was approved in 1950. And it's just amazing in terms of all the saints that were noted in that document from the Pope on the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary.
Well, I love that thing about the art, too, because we assume that in order for something to be real, it has to be written down in a document.
Right.
But if it's in the devotional life of the church through her art,
there's a reason why they're painting.
It's that art is teaching a story. But even something like the Assumption. So one of the points that TJ brings up in his episode is he had no idea about the Arian controversy, the Arian heresy, where there were these people who were denying the divinity of Jesus, and there's the whole Council of Nicaea and the arguments over that. And he would have never thought to himself on like the Assumption was defined, last century. He would never have thought, well, Jesus wasn't God until the Council of Nicaea. No, of course Christians always believed Jesus was God, but there was this fight that broke out, and they had to clarify it and make sure everybody knew what the real teaching was.
And who did that?
The Catholic Church, right?
We did.
There's no getting around it. And it was actually the guy who helped coordinated his mom's feast day is tomorrow, right? St. Helena. So this whole universe opened up to him, and there are a lot of other twists and turns in it, but the history part was a huge thing in TJ's journey.
He has a cool website. He calls it Evangelical Catholicism. I looked him up in preparation, for the program. So it's evangelicalcatholicism.com, the Center for Evangelical Catholicism.
Yeah, and he's trying to, through parishes and other things, try and do all kinds of efforts to help bring some of the gifts that he had as an evangelical into Catholic expressions of the faith. I think they're hosting a Hillbilly Thomas concert down there. He's down in Greenville, South Carolina, which is where there's a lot of Catholic converts down in Greenville, South Carolina. That's where Joseph Pierce is. That's where Father Longenecker is.
Right.
That's where
been there. I've spoken
Steve
there.
Wood
It's on fire down there. Yeah.
Keith and Tammy Kaiser down there. There's just this ocean of strong
It's
Catholic
a happening place for Catholicism, and so is the journey home. So I can't wait for tonight, of course, our very own Matt Swaim, TJ Nielsen, actually, that's his name, and he'll be on with his testimony on the journey home this evening, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be right back. Well, when this report was released late last week, I thought to myself, we need to get Bill back on. Our very own Bill Donahue, of course, regular guest on this program, Catholic Connection. You see him quite often on the world over with Raymond Arroyo and many other EWTN programs, and all over the media, and for a good reason. He's an expert on a number of topics, especially those impacting the church. He's a sociologist, Dr. Bill Donahue. So, Bill, Wolves in White Coats just came out last week, released in August of 2026 from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It's a 64-page report, so it's not that long, but if people don't have time to read the entire thing, I would at least read the summary. They give you a whole summary report in the beginning of it. And I went through most of it over the weekend in preparation for our interview this morning. And I am telling you, at one point, I had to stop because it was so heartbreaking, the testimonies of the young people. But then what was so disgusting was a whole nother segment where they address the fraud within the trans so-called industry, where they're doing these very expensive so-called operations that make lifelong patients. They call them captive patients in the document. Your thoughts this morning after this is released, and what can we do as Catholics in addition to prayer, do you think? Thanks for joining us, Bill.
Well, thank you so much. Well, first, let's commend the Trump administration. This would never have happened under Biden. As a matter of fact, the problems they talk about in the report largely took place during the Biden administration. They were full throttle on this whole idea of transgender mania. This is the greatest child abuse episode I've seen in my lifetime, and the fact that it's been conducted by the elite. Now, here's the problem. When you put ideological profit ahead of everything else, and you put financial profit with it, that's a very sick combination. When you have a situation of $120 million of gender care treatment since 2019, involving 5,500 surgical procedures and 8,500 courses of hormones or courses of hormones or blockers, you're talking about a massive scale here of exploiting young people, 80% of whom are girls. They're going through a tough patch. Okay, they need somebody to reach out to them. They don't need to have these doctors telling the parents, well, unless this girl transitions, unless you stop her, if you try to stop her, she may commit suicide. This is the old trope, and they do this over and over again. And they ruin these kids. And as one girl said, listen, where were they when we want to detransition?
Right.
They just leave us. They kick us to the curb because they already got their money.
And that was the other thing that came out in the report, is that these kids who are trying to detransition don't have the help they need. Now, there's more folks who are coming out, more medical experts that are there, but it's been a very long and detailed process, because those medical experts that are trying to help these kids are tossed to the side, they're canceled, and they have their own set of problems. Then there's a whole nother level here in terms of the fraud, and I want to just go over a few of the points in terms of the practices. The HHS is claiming the industry used vague or incorrect codes to justify insurance coverage for sex-rejecting interventions, encouraged vague or false coding through advocacy groups and industry presentations, and benefited from federal policies and funding that expanded access to these procedures. So not only did they damage so many lives, and the so-called procedures that they do, even if they detransition, they're affected the rest of their lives. It's very damaging. But they profited to the nth degree here, Bill.
Yeah, and you know what kills me? I mean, I know of doctors and dentists and others who will say, listen, you have a procedure here which you really needed to get done, but I know they're not going to cover it unless they put down a different code, because I don't want to see you get hit hard. That kind of thing goes on, and we understand at least it's done for benign motive. Here, you're putting down a different code so that you can get reimbursed for destroying a young kid. And they know what they're doing. They know that a man can't become a woman and vice versa, that these people are going through a rough time, and instead of helping them to get over it, they're exploiting them. And I don't see how somebody who can take an oath to try and help people and try to save lives and then profit off of basically like Frankenstein-type surgery. And yes, there have been a lot of progress now. We started with the Europeans. Actually, the whole problem started with the Europeans, with the Dutch, going back to about 2011. But God bless them, they at least were honest enough to say, listen, those initial studies were methodologically flawed, and we don't stand by them anymore. And the Finns and others, the Swedes, they've made a lot of progress. Unfortunately, the United States and Canada have been lagging behind. But I am optimistic. Do No Harm is a good organization. More and more doctors and nurses are speaking up about this, and we need to help these people and not punish them.
I do think the term captive patient is very helpful in terms of understanding what's going on here. And they're talking about the long-term revenue. Pediatric gender programs create what the report says are captive patients requiring recurring care, lab visits, lab work, prescriptions, mental health services, and surgeries. Now, this lifelong being a captive patient results in what? Billions and billions of dollars since 2019.
And just take the mental problem alone. I mean, physically, what they've done to these girls, they take away their breasts and everything else. But look at this; they have to live with this for the rest of their lives. Of course, they're going to have mental problems after this. And they notice that these doctors know that you take, let's say, a 15, 16-year-old girl. That's usually one of the prototypes. The kid's going through a rough patch. Okay, if that person is dissuaded from going forth with this, you give them maybe 6 months. Most of them will now say, you know what? I'm not ready to go through that. And I've read more about it, and I've heard about these testimonies. And so they won't go ahead with it. It's the ones who they quickly take you. I've read these stories like the person's in the room for 40 minutes, and they say, okay, go down the room, and we'll talk to you about this. You know, if a guy walked in and said, take off my leg, a doctor would say, I just can't. You can't walk into my office and say, take off your leg. But if you want to do something else with your genitals, oh, my, we can take care of that. There's no questions asked about it. This is the exploitation by the medical profession taking advantage of young kids. It's disgusting.
See, my concern, and by the way, of course, you recognize the voice of our good friend, Dr. Bill Donahue, president of the Catholic League. My concern is this story. It's getting some coverage, but not the coverage it should. And so many stories. This reminds me so much of the abortion industry, Bill, about the language that they use. For example, they throw out the term gender-affirming care all the time, right? Just like in the abortion industry, we hear reproductive care, reproductive choice, the disgusting bill that was passed and signed by the governor of Massachusetts last week, and they're all cheering and clapping because now we can have another state has abortion up to birth. I mean, if we don't get this out there and people don't realize what's going on, they fall for this language.
Well, that's true. They're very Orwellian about it. They're not going to talk about chemical castration. They won't use that term, genital mutilation. That's exactly what goes on here. No, they're going to sanitize it and try to make it sound like, well, this is just another, procedure that people need to do, have an appendectomy or something of that nature. No, this is life transforming, and what they're doing to these young kids is something that they will never get over. Now, fortunately, they are organizing, and then Chloe is one of the ones who's been doing this, but we don't have enough support yet. The Trump administration is putting out the message to a lot of these doctors and these hospitals, the Boston Children's Hospital and other places. Listen, you can't go on like this, and the universities. And isn't it interesting? The universities are there telling us about how we lack human rights respect in this country, and we have George Floyd, and we have everything else. Meanwhile, they're profiting off of these kids, exploiting them for like I say, for ideological purposes and for monetary purposes. You talk about human rights abuses. This is right at the top.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to take a quick break. It's 36 minutes past the hour, but again, reminding you that we're talking with Dr. Bill Donahue from the Catholic League about this new report that was just released last week, I believe late last week on Thursday. So you really need to take a look at this. At least look at the summary. There's a brief summary report for you, gives you the main highlights. But if you can, it's only 64 pages. Sit down and take a look at this. This is so important, especially with the midterms coming up. We need to know who's supporting what when we go to the voting booth. And we don't want to vote for anyone who supports this torture of children, something from which they can never return fully. Wolves in white coats, how doctors and hospitals pushed and profited from the fraud of gender medicine. More with Bill Donahue when we come back. So also in this report, a number of testimonies of what these young people went through and how they were pressured. The stories are absolutely heartbreaking. And in many cases, Bill, these kids were confused. Several of these young people, these brave young people who gave their testimony, they have abuse in their background.
Yes, they do, and that's often the case that you see. The same thing has been true in so many other areas where somebody might be abused and they're a young person, then they go out and they abuse somebody else. We saw this even within our own ranks with the priests back in the 60s and 70s when we had the clergy sexual abuse scandal. Many of them were abused themselves. It's repetitive. But, and these things are horrible, of course, and it's often the stepfathers, by the way, who do a lot of the damage. But the thing that bothers me the most here, and you mentioned the abortion industry before, and of course the nexus is this. You're talking about extremely well-educated and well-paid people. Mm-hmm. They know exactly what they're doing. And yet, for ideological and financial profit, they continue to exploit these kids. Now, it's running its course, but I think what Catholics need to do, first of all, make sure that if there's a hospital and a medical facility at the local Catholic university, find out to make sure that even there, sometimes somebody will cheat. Make sure that we're clean. We have less control, obviously, over the state-run institutions, but that we should at least make sure that our own are good. And I think they are. Don't get me wrong. I'm not being critical here, but I'm just saying I just know that human beings being what they are, if you give somebody a good reason ideologically and financially to move ahead, sometimes they'll do that at the expense of others.
Also, I think it's important because we have the midterms this year. We don't tell people for whom to vote, but certainly we talk about the issues. And this is a biggie, and sometimes this gets pushed to the side. For example, if you look at the issues that most people are concerned about, for example, in Massachusetts, when I interviewed last week the head of Massachusetts Citizens for Life, this governor is pushing in her reelection bid, she is pushing abortion as the key issue. And yet, if you look at the list of issues for people, it's at the bottom. Abortion isn't at the bottom. But for Catholics, it's a game changer. And the same should be for this issue as well, correct?
Look, they're all tied together. Even to that extent, this whole idea of having men participate in women's sports and women's basketball and things of that nature, it all comes down to basically this. These people, these are radical secularists. They're at war with God and with nature's God. They're involved. They hate human nature. They think that it's all malleable. Everything's a social construct. It's not a social construct. You're either XX or you're XY. I mean, I know there are a couple of different cases, X, Y, Y. All right, there's always an anomaly. But basically, you're talking about sex as binary. They are at war with that idea. They hate the idea that God made us this way. They hate the idea that there is such a thing as human nature. They want to change it. They want to involve in social engineering. That's the Marxist element. Sexual engineering. That's the Kinsey element, Alfred Kinsey.
Right.
That's what they want to do, socially and sexually engineer our society. And we need to resist them.
These whistleblowers are mentioned in the report, which I think is fascinating and so important. These people had so much courage coming forward and actually testifying before Congress.
Oh, I know. It's had tremendous effect. There's no question about it. It took a while before it happened. And like anything else, the one who breaks the ice first has to have really the most courage. And some of these young girls in particular have been absolutely magnificent. But you see, the pressure is on them. Let's say you're 15 and things are not going well at home and you're struggling with friends. You say you're going to transition. You make an announcement at school. Well, some people, not all of them, but some will now think you're a hero. Wow, go ahead and do it. If you have second thoughts, and a lot of them do, even early on, they're going to feel the pressure to go through because they're going to say, oh, I'm going to let everybody down at this point. We've got, young kids have always been susceptible to peer pressure. There's nothing new about that. But what's going on today is that you don't have mothers in particular who are stepping up and reaching out and helping out their young daughters on this. And there's a connection to all this stuff. When you deal with marriage, the family, sexuality, the interchangeability between the sexes, the war on God, the war on nature, all of these things come together, and as Catholics, we understand what truth is, and that's what's lacking in the discussion in what the medical profession and what they're doing. They don't want to deal with truth. We need to keep talking about truth, even if they don't like it.
Right. And I would highly recommend people to read this report. It's only 64 pages. You can get through it pretty quickly, but at least read the summary because we need to know what's going on here. Archbishop Chaput would always say we need to know how the media works so they don't work on us. But this is involving culture. This is involving pressure. This is involving what happens when particular people get in office and what they can do. And the damage that's been done here, though, Bill, it's irreversible in many cases.
And they don't want to bring them on 60 Minutes, do they? They're not going to have a segment on 60 Minutes. They're not going to do any highlight on ABC and the like. I mean, you'll get a couple of cable programs here and there. But the thing is, there are enough outlets out there. And what you're doing at EWTN and others, it's important that people find out the truth about what's going on because the others want to cover it up. They lie to us about everything. They're telling us that the guy Hans Piker who said that America deserved 9/11. Well, maybe I could have phrased it a little bit differently. No, I'm glad you phrased it just the way you did, sir.
Right.
Because now we know exactly what you stand for. America deserved 9/11.
Yeah, he's backing away from that, as is Al Sayed, trying to make it sound like he didn't actually say he hated Mackinac Island. He was talking about the public policy conference. Give me a break. Really? What are we, stupid?
They always lie. Why is it that their side always has to walk it back? I mean, now we have a wonderful piece by Kimberly Strassel out of the Wall Street Journal the other day, taking apart AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who says, well, back around 2020, that was kind of like woke one, and we said some crazy things. No. Don't walk away from it. We know exactly what you meant. We know the destructive qualities of what you had to say about get rid of the police, get rid of the prisons. And by the way, DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, they are still saying get rid of the prisons.
Mm-hmm.
But where are we going to put them?
Right.
If you're going to empty the prisons, I would only put them in the rich zip codes and voted for these people and let them see what they think about then. It's absolute insanity. And now we have the DSA coming out praising Fidel Castro. Why don't they go to Miami and talk to the Cubans who had to live under him?
Right. Well, they have no idea what really happened or history, and that's the problem. Yeah, I saw an interview with I forget what channel it was on, of one of the DSA leaders on the East Coast, and she was basically saying that he asked her, "What if my daughter gets raped and you free everybody in the prison or there's no police?" Well, we need to concentrate on the streetlights. That's really going to help. I mean, it's so ridiculous, unbelievable. Bill, thank you so much. We'll talk to you in about 2 weeks.
Sounds
great
great
job as always. Catholic League. Of course, he's the president of the Catholic League, catholicleague.org. And important topic we're talking about, this new report that came out on Thursday from the Department of Health and Human Services. And just Google wolves in white coats and you'll find it. You need to read it. And we also need to read Scripture every day and take it to heart. That's why we also are always joined by Gail Buckley-Barringer from Catholic Scripture Study International. I love this verse. It gave me a lot of comfort with everything that's going on in the world. Gail, thanks for joining us again on a Monday.
I'm just thinking the same thing, Teresa. We have so much chaos and stuff going on in the world. We need this verse. And so today's verse is from Psalms 131, which says, "But I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child in its mother's arms." Like you said, I love it too, Teresa, because it gives us such a beautiful picture of what God wants us for us, He says, "I've calmed and quieted my soul." What a wonderful thing that would be, to be able to say honestly, that, because if we're being truthful, most of us have hearts that are anything but quiet, right? Like you and Bill were just talking about. There's so much going on. There's so much chaos, so much to worry about. And, we worry and we make plans and we think about what might happen tomorrow, and we replay things that happened yesterday. We worry about our children, our grandchildren. We worry about our country. And the truth is, we're not supposed to worry. God tells us in Matthew 6:25 not to worry. It's really simple to worry, but we all do it. And I'm certainly guilty myself. And then we, it's not enough that we're not concerned about all those things, but then we turn on the television or we pick up our phones and we're immediately given, a dozen other things to worry about or to think about. And Teresa, you wrote a book about that, about how media and things like
Noise.
That
My very first book, Noise.
Yeah, yeah. It's so true. It really is true. And, we live in a world that seems to be constantly shouting at us. News alerts and text messages, emails, on social media, political arguments, all these things. There's bad news from everywhere, and it's just always hitting us all the time. And I think our souls must be exhausted, not from doing something, but from simply never stop thinking about everything. And I think women are worse than men. Men have a capacity or something to sort of turn their brains off. Have you ever asked your husband, "What do you think about?" They always say nothing. What do you think about? Nothing. How can you not be thinking about something? But I think men have a way of somehow just turning off their brains sometimes, but we can't. We're wired.
And I don't know if you do this, but do you go from one topic to the next really quickly? Because I do that all the time because my mind is always moving, as you're saying. And my husband will say, "Okay, wait a minute, I got to change gears here." And I'll go, vroom, 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 vroom. Because he says, "Well, what are we talking about now? Because you just mentioned this, and now we're talking about this. Are we done with the other topic yet?"
It's so true. It's exactly right. We're just not wired the same. But, But when you think about this verse, how about a child being in its mother's arms and resting comfortably. Think about when we were babes in our mother's arms. We didn't need to know about what was going on. We didn't need to understand how the bills got paid or what was going on in the world. We just felt safe and loved. And that's what the psalmist wants to give us. It's about our relationship with God, just rest in his arms. And we don't have to understand, what everything that's happening in our lives. We don't have to know what's going to happen tomorrow. And, we don't have to solve every problem. We simply have to learn to rest in the arms of our Heavenly Father. And, we should be saying, Lord, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I know you're with me. And that's faith and that's trust, like St. Faustina said, Jesus told her we have to learn to love him and trust him and say, Jesus, I trust in you. And remember, when Peter was walking on the water and then he started doubting and worrying and he started sinking, and Jesus said, oh, you have little faith, why did you doubt? And so sometimes we make things worse. We try to hand it over to God, but then we take it back, if something doesn't happen right away. I am totally guilty of that. I have a son who's bipolar, and growing up, I can't tell you how many times I handed him over to God and then grabbed him right back.
Okay, well, what you say, okay, Lord, it's yours, but one more thing before I turn it over to you. Exactly. Right? Just one more thing. I just want to say one more thing, Lord, then you can have it. But you know what I thought of when I saw a verse for today? Because we just had the Feast of the Assumption, of course, over the weekend. I thought about the Blessed Mother and how she's always telling us over and over and over, am I not your mother? Just like she said to San Juan Diego. She's so comforting. And I just thought about that. I rested in that. And I really rested in her love over the weekend, thinking about all the craziness and sometimes having to prepare for the show. It's just so incredibly overwhelming when you see what's out there. Absolutely. And you have to inform people. But I always remember, we give the information and then we do what we have to do, and then we have to let it go. We really do.
We do. And the way we can do that, we can turn off our televisions. We can turn off our computers. We can go in front of the Blessed Sacrament. We can read Scripture, things like that. Instead of, surrounding ourselves with all this noise and social media, et cetera, we should try to quiet our souls. And that's harder for us women to do, I think, but we should do it. And step away from all the noise, all the chaos and problems. And, remember Elijah, he heard God in a still, quiet whisper.
Yep, I love that.
That's what we need to do. We need to get still and pray the rosary, read Scripture, whatever it takes. But
Amen.
Certainly turn off the television and our phones. At least do it
except for Catholic media. But once in a while, you got to turn off everything. But Catholic media will be much more comforting, informative, but comforting at the end of the day because we know who wins. Gail, beautiful job. Write it down, folks. Our verse for the week, Psalm 131:2. But I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child in its mother's arms. Again, Psalm 131:2, our scripture verse of the week. We'll be right back. Hope you enjoyed the first hour of Catholic Connection on a Monday, August 17th, 2026, the feast of a beautiful saint, Santa Chiara of Montefalco, St. Clare of the Cross, a beautiful church. If you visit Umbria, maybe if you're heading to the anniversary of St. Francis this year in October, you can go a little bit east. It's about 45 minutes from Perugia. Perugia is very close to Assisi, by the way. Beautiful town. The church is actually outside the city gates. Montefalco is a small gated city on top of a hill, and you walk up a very, very steep hill to get to the main piazza. But it's just a lovely area, and the church is amazing because you can actually venerate her relics, and the relics include a piece of her heart where you could see the cross implanted on her heart. So it's a great place to go for a pilgrimage, to continue your pilgrimage if you're heading to the land of Umbria for the great St. Francis of Assisi. We're celebrating, of course, his 800th anniversary of his passing, his transit, and that comes up in October. By the way, all of this is covered in my book, my EWTN book, Italy's Shrines and Wonders. St. Clare is in Volume 1. Coming up in hour number 2 of Catholic Connection on a Monday morning, we're going to continue our conversation from a different perspective, though, regarding the nonsense about this whole transgender issue in the WNBA. So we're going to talk to an expert in Catholic athletics. Samantha Kelly is back with us. She's a wonderful sister in the Lord and president of a powerful ministry, Fierce Athletic. We're going to talk about the WNBA, the Women's Basketball Association, who couldn't define a woman at their meeting last week. And there's a funny video we're going to share with you in 2 cents, and I'll have some additional comments on that. Stay tuned. More Catholic Connection coming your way on a Monday morning. St. Clare of Montefalco, pray for us.
Welcome Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it is a Monday morning. Hope your Monday is going well. Thanks for tuning in to hour number 2 on EWTN Radio Extra. Very much looking forward to spending 2 segments with Samantha Kelly. She's the president of a beautiful organization for Catholic female athletes. The name of the organization is FIERCE. She's been with us before, and we're following up with her on the whole WNBA controversy and the trans, I'm using the air quotes here, athletic debate, and of course the pushback that basketball star Sophie Cunningham is getting for saying, you know what, women's sports should be about women and we need to protect girls. Shocker, what a concept. So we'll get Samantha's take on this, and it's just so sad what's happening. I mean, women have fought and worked so hard for women's sports and to be recognized, and now that is fading away because of this agenda that's out there. Now, in 2 cents, we'll have some scripture verses as well in terms of foolishness and what happens when you lose your way. And this is what's happening with this so-called discussion within the WNBA. Last week they had a meeting and they were going to describe a woman, give a definition, and they couldn't do it. They said, we've had many, many fruitful discussions. We're going to come back to this. That in itself shows you how they are struggling because they realize whatever they say is going to back them in a corner. If they say that a woman is anyone who identifies as a woman, who dresses as a woman, then they have to let, for example, those 2 huge basketball stars, can't remember their names right now, one of them is Royce White, I believe, who want to play for the WNBA because they say they sometimes identify as women. They have to let them in and any other man who wants to play in there, okay? And I don't think they want a Royce White in their team because they know how he would just take over in terms of women and sports, scoring the most points and possibly hurting someone physically because he's such a large man and successful at what he does, right? Or did. He's retired now. He's in politics. But it's just ridiculous. So we're going to play this video of this woman, and she calls herself Conservative Mama. And her videos are very funny. She's a sister in the Lord. On her website, you can see that she's a very strong conservative mom. But she's a very good little actress in her own right, and she makes these videos that poke fun at the reality of what we're dealing with today. And it really highlights the truth of who we are, made in the image and likeness of God, and how ridiculous it gets when you try to deny that. So we'll play that video for you first, and we'll talk about church teaching briefly and some scripture verses to back that up. So that is a show for a Monday morning, hour number 2 here on EWTN's Radio Extra. Weather-wise, according to the National Weather Service, we still have gusty winds and heavy rain that's causing flooding problems in Hawaii as Tropical Storm Lala continues to move away from the islands, but they still have many issues related to that storm. And then closer to home, stateside severe thunderstorms and heavy rainfall are shifting into the southern Appalachians today, and strong to severe thunderstorms are producing large hail, scattered wind gusts, and heavy rain across the northern and central plains. 3 minutes past the hour now. We appreciate your listenership, and let's do the news here on EWTN's Radio Extra. Officials in Indiana say at least 7 people ranging in age from 4 to 86 years old have died. This after storms caused flash flooding across that state. Maggie Vespa explaining evacuees in Indianapolis have been returning to their flooded homes to see the damage.
Johnny Green just gave up his flood insurance after paying off his home. He's injured and unable to work right now.
I've been off work now 6 weeks and haven't had a paycheck, and short-term disability hasn't kicked in.
But it seems like everyone needs help.
Everybody needs help, not just me.
A record amount of rain causing streams and rivers to flood their banks across the state last week, leading the governor, Mike Braun, to request a presidential emergency declaration, which the president has granted. And meanwhile, Perry Williams tells us several Illinois suburban leaders in areas south of Chicago are demanding federal aid as well, following damage from a recent severe storm in their area.
Lansing Mayor Brian Hardy describes the destruction in his community.
I don't care what block you go down, you're going to see destruction. You're going to see trees and homes, uprooted trees, sidewalks, streets, curbs, infrastructure that's damaged.
Mayor Hardy added that his city is still recovering from a July tornado before the latest storms hit. Meanwhile, Flossmoor Mayor Michelle Nelson says the recovery is slow and help is much needed from the federal government. I'm Perry Williams.
In New York, Amtrak reopening the East River Tunnel today. It's been shut down for Superstorm Sandy-related repairs and caused disruptions for daily riders. Amtrak says a more than a century-old tunnel has been modernized and rebuilt after it was out of action since May of last year. The tunnel closure forced disruptions for New Jersey Transit and Long Island Railroad riders. Work is expected to start on another Amtrak tunnel, also damaged by Sandy, and that work will begin this fall. Lisa Taylor tells us the National Weather Service says Hurricane Lala has weakened after a death has been reported in Hawaii.
Lala has now been downgraded to a tropical storm with sustained winds of 70 miles per hour and is slowly moving past Hawaii's Big Island. Morgan Chesky is in Hilo.
We know that Oahu and Kauai could see its impact late Sunday and into Monday. The biggest threat here remains that potential for absolutely devastating flash floods.
Thousands of customers are without power across the state. Hawaii Governor Josh Green said Saturday he's urging residents to stay off the roads after a terrible car accident that caused a fatality in hurricane-force winds on the Big Island. I'm Lisa Taylor.
The memorandum of understanding that was supposed to put a pause on fighting between the U.S. and Iran expires today. The deal was reached back in June after high-level talks were mediated by Pakistan. There's little evidence, though, that either side wants to extend that agreement. Both sides have accused the other of violating the terms of the deal multiple times. The deal aimed to put a pause on fighting, reopen the Strait of Hormuz, lift a U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports, and end the war between Israel and Lebanon. Both the U.S. and Iran have said they are winning the war, and the ceasefire has had little impact. Traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, a critical oil corridor, remains well below pre-war levels. And President Trump is directing the Pentagon to scale back joint military services with South Korea. Nick Harper reporting Trump made the announcement in a Truth Social post.
He says that it's costly, but he also says it sends a signal that is totally inappropriate and hostile to North Korea, who he says has always been unthreatening and respectful. He says it's too late to cancel the joint exercises, but he's asked Pete Hegseth to substantially reduce them.
And Trump also criticizing South Korea's position on the conflict involving Iran. Pope Leo says sport can be a prophecy of peace. This ahead of the Mediterranean Games. As Devin Watkins reports, those games are being held this week in southern Italy.
4 athletes from Atletica Vaticana are set to take part in the 20th Mediterranean Games, which will be held in the southern Italian city of Taranto from August 21st to September 3rd. Around 4,000 athletes from 26 countries in Africa, Asia, and Europe, all linked by the Mediterranean Sea, will compete in 33 different sports. The members of the Holy See Sports Association will compete in the men's paddle doubles, fencing, and cycling. Ahead of the event, Pope Leo XIV expressed his hope that the 2026 Mediterranean Games may offer the world a visible sign of peace and encounter. This week, the Mediterranean Games will begin in Taranto, he said at the Angelus address on Sunday. I hope that this sporting event may be a prophecy of peace and fraternity among the peoples of the region and of the whole world. Pope Leo has frequently said that sport reaches its deepest meaning when competition becomes encounter and athletes recognize each other as members of the same human family. On the first day of the Mediterranean Games, Archbishop Ciro Miniero of Taranto will preside at Mass in the city's cathedral. He will be joined by Bishop Paul Tai, Secretary of the Dicastery for Culture and Education, as they welcome the Cross of the Athletes. According to a press release, the cross will remain in the cathedral throughout the Games as a spiritual point of reference. It has accompanied athletes at international sporting events since the 2012 London Olympic and Paralympic Games. Archbishop Miniero said sport offers a useful opportunity for professionals and amateurs, including children, to look past social differences and promote fraternity. Cardinal Jose Tolentino de Mendoza, prefect of the Dicastery for Culture and Education, said the presence of Atletica Vaticana at the event offers a significant gesture of fraternity. He called the Cross of the Athletes a wordless message affirming that every life, even through sweat and suffering, deserves love and respect. I'm Devin Watkins.
Following the Angelus on Sunday, meanwhile, the Holy Father once again calling for an end to the repeated acts of violence against the Palestinian population of the West Bank. The Holy Father adding an urgent appeal to the international community to ensure that progress is made toward a two-state solution for a just and lasting peace. The Holy See has consistently, as Vatican News reports, affirmed its position. The two-state solution, based on secure and internationally recognized borders, is the only viable and equitable path toward a just and lasting peace in the Holy Land, as noted by Archbishop Kasha in an address to the UN in July of last year. And during Mass in Castel Gandolfo for the Solemnity of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, Pope Leo marveled how the Blessed Virgin, through God's grace, leads us toward heaven, insisting that love is humanity's most beautiful adornment, stressing that it transfigures, transforms, lifts us up, makes us light, free, and closer to God, even amid life's up and downs. The solemnity, the Holy Father recalled, that the magisterium of the Church teaches us that Mary, having completed the course of her earthly life, was assumed body and soul into heavenly glory, and points out to us in this mystery the fulfillment of the most perfect grace that God bestowed upon her at her Immaculate Conception. For this reason, the Pope noting many works of art inspired by the scene described in the passage in the book of Revelation that they heard in the first reading, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, signifying that in Mary's heart, heaven and earth, time and eternity do indeed meet. Daria Albinger reports a former flight attendant has now started his annual 9/11 Remembrance event.
You see just about everything in New York City, but this could be a first. A flight attendant pushing a beverage cart down the street in Lower Manhattan. That's what Paul Veneto is going to do September 11th. The retired flight attendant has begun his annual trek to Ground Zero in what's known as Polly's Push. He started in Boston and will travel 220 miles through 60 cities and towns in memory of those who died on 9/11 and everyone who was impacted by the attacks. Veneto says he made a promise, as many did, never to forget after 9/11, and this is his way of honoring it. He's joined by airline crew members across much of the journey. In New York, I'm Daria Albinger.
Accused killer Luigi Mangioni's online legal defense fundraiser is still going despite his recent guilty plea to federal charges tied to the fatal shooting of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. While Mangioni pleaded guilty last week to stalking charges, he still faces separate New York state murder charges. A spokesperson for online fundraising platform Give, Send, Go told TMZ the money is being raised to cover Mangioni's defense and he still has unresolved legal matters. The effort so far has raised more than $1.5 million. Attorney General Todd Blanche says the FBI is taking over the investigation into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, but that may not be the best course of action. Appearing on NBC's Meet the Press yesterday, he shared his thoughts about the high-profile case.
Whether we come in with sharp elbows and take it over, that's not necessarily the right thing to do for her or for anybody.
Blanche also saying that there was no update on the investigation to share publicly. And Lisa Carton tells us the Food and Drug Administration has urged an upgrade to the egg recall, and it's up to the highest risk level now.
The FDA declared it a Class 1 recall on Wednesday, citing the possibility that consuming the eggs could cause serious health consequences or death. According to the latest update, nearly 98 people have been sickened across 17 states, with 26 hospitalizations. No deaths have been reported. The recalled products were sold under several brands, including Kroger, Brookshire's, Country Morning, Simple Truth, and Sunups, as well as various bulk Grade A and Grade AA eggs. I'm Lisa Carton.
Up next in our 2 Cents segment on a Monday, more examples of why common sense is obviously not that common anymore. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Catholic Connection. Great to be with you. On a Monday morning, it is August 17th, 2026. Crazy stuff going out there today, right? And that's why we discussed in the first hour with Gail Buckley how important it is to hold on to the truth and the fact that God is still very large and very much in charge, as I like to say. But we need to understand, what's going on in terms of the news and understand how certain entities, as we mentioned in the last hour, actually with Bill Donahue talking about this issue of transgenderism, how they may be going after us and trying to get us to change our mind. And really, talk nonsense. I mean, it's just incredible what's going on here, especially with the situation with female athletes, okay? And how there's this big push now to be open to men. They say transgender women. They're biological men who identify as women. And what that means at the end of the day is women are being pushed out of their own sports that they fought so hard to join and to form in terms of their own basketball association, right? Or other sports as well. And many women are saying, oh, it's just fine to do this. And so last week, the WNBA, because of all the controversy with two former basketball stars, two men, very prominent in the NBA in their own right at one time, said they once in a while identify as women and they want to join the WNBA. So they are going to try out, or they want to try out. If the WNBA says they're open and they're very inclusive, then what's wrong? Now, obviously, these guys were trying to make a point, and one of them, I think it's Royce White, is running for office in Minnesota. But at the end of the day, what he's saying is true. You can't have it both ways. If you're sitting there saying we're not going to specify actually what a woman is, or if we say sometimes it's somebody who identifies as a woman, who throws on a wig and says, today I feel like a woman, if you don't give a specific definition, you can't expect things like this not to happen. So what does the church say about this? The Catholic Church teaches each person is created male or female by God, and gender identity cannot be separated from biological sex. It also, of course, always calls for compassionate pastoral care for those who are experiencing gender dysphoria. And what we're seeing now, though, is truly, in terms of public discussions, foolishness. And Scripture is pretty clear that a lot of this is always going to be with us. Proverbs 1:7, the fear of the Lord is a beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. That is a perfect verse for what's going on. Now, the fear of the Lord does not mean you have to run and hide like Adam and Eve did, or be afraid that the Lord is going to strike you down somehow. It is understanding who God is and who we are not. And if we respect the way we are designed by God, in his image and likeness, male and female, that's knowledge. That's recognizing truth. But if we don't, then we become like the fools that we're seeing in these conversations who despise wisdom and instruction, and also obviously truth. Another verse in Proverbs 14:16, the wise fear the Lord and shun evil, but a fool is hot-headed and yet feels secure. Psalm 14:1, the fool says in his heart, there is no God, they are corrupt, their deeds are vile, there is no one who does good. So we always have to try to be joyful no matter what. And this is what I love about this woman, Conservative Mama. She has a popular blog. She's on TikTok. She's on a lot of social media outlets. And after this meeting last week with the WNBA, where they had to table their discussion, and we'll have more on that after this clip if we have time, on what is a woman, defining a woman, she did this video, and she plays all the different characters that she's portraying on these short clips. This one's about 3 minutes long. I laughed so hard, and it just lifted me up, because this just shows, and not laughing in a mean way toward these people, but you really have to pray for them, because it really reveals just how ridiculous and how they back themselves in a corner because they refuse themselves to look at reality. Take a listen.
Thank you all for joining me today in this WNBA task force. Our task today is to be able to come up with some eligibility requirements for an individual to meet in order to be able to play in the WNBA. Let's start with some suggestions. I think they should be under 6'5". No taller than 6'5". Yes, I think they should not be able to have a beard. No facial hair. I just really request that throughout this entire conversation, we do not use the term biological female, because science is a colonial construct. So. Exactly. My cousin's roommate identifies as a dog on Tuesdays and also would like to be a point guard in the WNBA. So are we going to just, we're not going to allow dogs to play? Are we just going to completely exclude animals? I thought we were all about inclusivity. So that is a tough one. I think we may be forced to say humans only. Yes, but what if the dog identifies as a human? So, okay, let's just simplify it. They need to have a beating heart. Can we all get behind that? Yes. Yeah. I think the real issue comes down to is a lot of people are asking, what does the W stand for in the WNBA? And we're going to have to define woman. So let's try to move forward with that in mind.
Well, a woman is anyone that says they identify as a woman. So.
Yes, but then we're going to have men saying that they're women. Yes, and we've got Enes Kanter Freedom and Royce White now saying that they are women.
So, okay. A woman is
a woman. And women are women. And if you have a woman and a woman, you have two women. And then you have multiple women. You have more than one. And a woman is, this is tough. This is a tough one. It's just so hard. This is really, it's difficult. It's challenge. Yes, Karen. Yeah, I'm just throwing it out there, but why don't we just say that a woman is a grown individual that was assigned female at birth?
wow.
Karen, out of all of the absurd things you have said since I've met you, this takes the cake. Get out! Get out now!
So you could see just how ridiculous this is, and that is a really funny clip, and I think it's very well done, done by a woman who calls herself Conservative Mama. She's out there on social media, does all these different videos and showing the hypocrisy and the ridiculousness of some of these leftist concepts, including this whole issue of men identifying as women and playing in women's sports, and the fact that the WNBA will not come up with a definition. Okay, so they had a meeting last week. Here's a summary. The WNBA has left unresolved a growing dispute over transgender player eligibility after a recent league meeting concluded without establishing criteria defining who qualifies as a woman for purposes of competition. This is what the video clip was about, right? The discussion took place as part of what the league described as an anti-hate task force meeting convened amid increasing attention to transgender participation in women's basketball. Following the meeting, the WNBA said there were no immediate eligibility matters requiring action, indicating that conversations surrounding the issue would continue. Here's your statement. Today's meeting covered a wide range of topics, including ongoing discussions on transgender athletes and the continued hate and vitriol directed at players online. Are you speaking of those who identify as the opposite sex? Or are you speaking of the women who are speaking up for other women and young kids? We'll continue, they say, to engage all league stakeholders in the coming weeks and months. We will approach these important conversations thoughtfully and in alignment with the values of our league. There are no immediate eligibility matters affecting the WNBA. And we strongly denounce the bad faith effort to use these topics to demean or marginalize others. No, that's what you are doing, WNBA. The other people are speaking out and showing the foolishness when you say that biological men can compete in women's sports and yet deny to biological men their interest in doing so. You're a hypocrite. And now you can't handle it. And the truth has backed you into a corner. We'll be right back. 27 minutes past the hour. Great to be with you. Great to have Samantha Kelly back with us. She's the president of Fierce Athlete, and she is a strong Catholic sister in the Lord, helping other women in athletics. And this morning, we're grabbing her expertise once again on this whole trans issue. Samantha, this keeps getting pushed to a different level in terms of the pressure now that's on the WNBA and other organizations that are trying to say it's okay for biological men to compete in women's sports. First, tell us about your beautiful organization, Fierce. I want to make sure we give it the proper attention because what you're doing is just so important for young women. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, Teresa. Yeah, so Fierce Athlete, our mission is to empower female athletes to thrive in their God-given identity and femininity. So we talk a lot about, your identity is as a daughter of God, and that you can be both feminine and athletic. We're very heavily influenced by the theology of the body. And we existed, we've been around for 10 years. So we existed far before this whole trans issue came into play. But I think God had us very strategically placed, if you will, because, we understand the truth of the human person, of what it is to be a woman, actually. And so when this wave of transgenderism came, we've just been able to speak into, the truth of the matter amidst it all.
I was thinking about that. Talk about providence, the fact that you were around really before this became like constant household conversation. What are you hearing from now, Samantha, especially in the last few years, last few months, from women athletes, Catholic women athletes, about what's going on with this?
Yeah, I think there's both a frustration, just kind of at the injustice and ludicrousy of it all. But there's also, I think, a sadness too. I think I knew that this issue was hurting women's hearts when it was first kind of coming around back to when, Will Thomas was swimming in NCAA championships. A young woman, young prospective, high schooler who's going to go on and play D1 basketball just said to me, this whole issue makes me feel like I don't matter. And that broke my heart, because that's the exact opposite of what sport teaches young women. It should teach them confidence and virtue and things. And when women look at the lack of the though I think there's some fight coming out right now, but the lack of fight of protection for them on behalf of, their parents and their coaches and the greater sports community, it does make them feel slighted, which is sad.
To me, what's extremely sad, I'm a lot older than you, and I can remember when women's sports were not considered to be important. There wasn't much emphasis on them, and they fought for everything. Let's go back to the film A League of Her Own, which is based on a true story in terms of how the women took over baseball when men went to war, and they were able to continue that league to go on for many, many years, and they fought for it, and women have been fighting ever since. And it seems to me ridiculous for these coaches to support men, biological men, to play in women's sports. They're basically adding to their own demise.
Yeah, it's super disappointing. And again, we're seeing the statements recently from the WNBA coaches, or them, Cheryl Reeves, the Minnesota Lynx coach, wearing a T-shirt on the sidelines that say trans kids matter in the game recently. But we had Dawn Staley, who coaches South Carolina women's basketball, after they won the national championship 2 years ago, say, I support this. And these are the women that one themselves played and laid the foundation, and now they're just cutting our knees out, And so it's really disappointing that they're not taking a stand. And even the likes of a Billie Jean King, it's remarkable, because she was kind of, she's the one that stood up for women's athletics, and now she's even backing this issue. It's how can you? To be frank, it doesn't make sense to me. Right? And it is sad, right?
Where do you think this is going in terms of, especially now that you have the WNBA? They're actually backed into a corner with Enos Freedom and Royce White coming out last week saying that they want to try out for the WNBA. They had this meeting, but they still couldn't come up with a definition of a woman. Where do you think this is going with them?
Yeah, I think they're going to be forced at some point to make a decision, to make a stance, right? And they're balking right now and trying not to. I think they're trying to figure out what to do, to be frank. But it's good that these former NBA players are stepping up and kind of forcing them to take a stance. We'll see how it plays out. I can't imagine they're going to let NBA players play in the WNBA. So, the hope is they do make a stance. And I think on a greater cultural level, we see the Supreme Court, just made this statement at the end of July about allowing the 27 states to protect women's sports, et cetera. But there's still, 23 states that don't. And so the battle is going to continue for sure, but I think people are waking up, and the likes of Sophie Cunningham, her stepping up, the pro women's tennis players stepping up who have kind of backed her. There's continual momentum, which I think is positive.
It is so sad. And by the way, if you're just joining us on a Monday morning, we are talking with Samantha Kelly. She's back with us. She's a president of Fierce Athlete. It is so sad how she is being treated, Sophie Cunningham, not only outside in terms of the culture and how people are just going after her and just attacking her and criticizing her, but physically on the court. I was telling you during the break, I don't know that much about sports. You can put what I know about sports into a thimble. But when I saw the video of her, the foul, and more than once, that was ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And at the same time, from somebody who does know sport, it's not surprising, which is really sad. It's getting eyes, but I have athletes in other sports who have stood up on this issue, and they're hated, they're booed, they're taken out. And I think even athletes who not necessarily have been public on this issue, but who are just maybe living a conservative lifestyle, you see them targeted. You see other players, for example, Caitlin Clark. You've seen fouls against her that are unfair because she's good. And because she's conservative and straight, and that's there's a deep-seated envy and a deep-seated hatred, and that's again the antithesis of sport. But it comes out in these really, brutal ways where women aren't supporting each other, but are actually doing the opposite.
So how do young women, what do you say to young women who are interested in maybe doing sports professionally or playing at the college level, really using their God-given talents and efforts? It must be pretty frightening.
Yes and no. It's super interesting. There's plenty of Christian and Catholic women in the pro level who do feel like they have to keep their faith quiet, which is unfortunate, and that's their discernment. I back a lot of those women because they see that if it is public, then this is the reaction, right? This is the brutality that they'll receive. There's been women in the past who have been let go from teams. Not saying that's legal, but et cetera. But at the same time, and this might be a controversial thing to say, female athletes are fighters, and so my prayer in this whole thing is, I pray that people have conversions because of this, because I know as female athletes, we will stand, and it's going to reveal, all the issues behind this, the difference in men and women, the truth of human sexuality, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you have a lot of young women who, I don't know if they're filled with fear. I think I see they're ready for the battle, if you will. And I think that's the virtue that they've honestly learned through sport.
I love that point. And the truth is revealed in all of this. And that's why I played that clip from Conservative Mama, because you have to laugh or else you'll cry. But what she did was she very beautifully and, articulated the problem with the argument of women, competing against men in women's sports, biological men, and that they don't want to come up with an answer because they realize they're going to back themselves in a corner because the truth hurts. We'll be right back with Samantha Kelly, more discussion. She's a president of Fierce Athlete, and we'll give you the website as well. Samantha Kelly is back with us. She's a president of a beautiful ministry and organization, Fierce Athlete. Samantha, what's the website?
Fierce.org.
Awesome. Fierce, F-I-E-R-C-E, of course, the word fierce. Why that word? Why did you choose that?
Well, the Lord gave it to me, to be short. And it does stand for some of our formation about femininity and identity and the beauty of the body. But I also like Our Lady is our patron, and we talk about Our Lady's tender side, which is beautiful, and that's kind of the other half of fierce. But she's also, I think, the fiercest woman that ever lived. Right? She crushes the head of Satan with a bare foot, and we don't oftentimes talk about that side of Our Lady, just like the mama bear side of her. And so, as women, right, as athletes, we have the permission to be competitive, but also we can't divorce that from our natural tender side, and so. It's kind of a reclaiming of the word and the embodiment, I think, of what it means to be a female athlete. Yeah.
So tell our listeners what you do with your ministry, because especially right now, and again, I think it is providential, as you said earlier, Samantha, that you have been around for a decade, long before all these different issues really were household terms and people were used to hearing about biological men identifying as women and winning all these different awards and taking them, pulling women's victories right out beneath their feet. Let's talk about that in terms of what you do for female athletes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think and this is for young people across the board, but I think particularly athletes, and then particularly even further female athletes, we're in an identity crisis. So people just don't know who they are, right? They've not grown up with a compass of faith, a deep sense of truth. And, the symptoms of that are all the issues, which are actually I think there's exposure to them, but they're still, I think, pretty well hidden in women's sports. So, the higher levels of drinking, the promiscuity, the same-sex attraction, the eating disorders, the mental health issues. I would claim that all of that is a lack of understanding of who we actually are as daughters of God. And so we really focus on the simple truths of who we are and teaching young women that, because that creates great freedom to then embrace their femininity, to embrace their athleticism, to embrace their call to holiness. And so, it's a lot of formation, but we do that. I'll go in. I'm actually in Cleveland right now. I was just running a clinic yesterday for a high school girls soccer team, a preseason kind of clinic where I'm working them out and teaching them how to instill their faith into their athleticism by offering it up, by having quote unquote mental toughness, which is spiritual warfare. But then also, giving them talks on the beauty of their bodies, the beauty of their femininity, their true identity. So we do events, we do talks. I mean, I mentor athletes from the middle school level all the way up through Olympians. And then we have a lot of formation materials. So I've written a book for young female athletes. We have a podcast, et cetera. So we're launching chapters at schools and colleges around the country. So we're just trying to share this formation, and ultimately, through changing the hearts of female athletes, change the culture because they have impact. So that's what we're doing.
And the website for more information on the conferences, on the clinics, on the retreats, you can go to fierceathlete.org. So tell us a little bit about your story. Why did you decide that this is something you wanted to do full time?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't in my plans, but the Lord has different plans when we encounter him. So I was a D1 soccer player at the University of Connecticut, and had the classic identity crisis. So if you had asked me who I was, I would have said athlete. And then I underwent like a quote unquote career-ending injury. I did end up coming back from it, but in that time of identity loss is where I had a great need for faith, and had a radical encounter with Jesus in the Eucharist. And something about us athletes is when we're all in. And so I saw that my life needed to change, and that other people needed to know the joy that I had experienced. And so my mission became, okay, now I'm going to evangelize my team. And I was the only practicing Catholic or Christian on my team of 30 women. And then it became, I'm going to evangelize the athletic department at UConn. And it's crazy because there's still a Bible study going that I started, 15 years ago. And then it became, okay, I'm going to give my life to this. And I became a focused missionary. And then it became, okay, Lord, you're calling me to meet a real need in the church and in women's hearts. And so, it was all his idea. I just keep saying yes, which I joke is it's a very naive yes because of what it entails. But
yeah, you have no idea, right? Okay,
yeah, it's the most adventurous and most beautiful. Yeah.
But think about again. I keep going back to the providence here of you are the perfect person in the church to talk about these things and to help people understand it.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. I've become close with Riley Gaines, for example, and she explains this issue from a very, physiological level. Like, this is the physiology, here's the political implications, et cetera. But what I've realized is, and I have a background in training in theology of the body and a master's in psychology, and so what I can offer and what I try to offer young people is, here's the theology, but here's really the anthropology behind all of this. Because if we can understand what it means to be human, and God's design for us as male and female, then everything else kind of falls into place. And so not only on this issue, but a lot of other issues in our culture, you're able to understand truth.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Once again, we're talking with Samantha Kelly, president of Fierce Athlete. Check out their beautiful website if you're interested in bringing Samantha to your school or your parish, fierceathlete.org. Again, fierceathlete.org. I wanted to go back to something you said about you're hoping for, and this is my prayer as well, for conversions through all of this. And I do think what happens, and one of the reasons, again, that I played the video earlier from Conservative Mama, I believe that when people start hearing themselves speak on some level, somebody somewhere, either the person speaking in an organization like the WNBA, where they're trying to make up their mind as to what is a woman, and they're realizing the pickle they've gotten themselves into because of their denying reality, at some level, I really pray that they're going to hear themselves, or someone listening to us, or someone watching something on television or hearing it in a newscast will realize, okay, that's really crazy. I need to get back to basics and have a come to Jesus moment. I'm sure that's your hope too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you use the word reality. This is, and I know she's been on the show too, but Mary Hassan has been
I love her.
Tremendous mentor in all of this. And her line, and I steal it, her line is, "I'm on team reality." And that's so
Go team reality. I love that.
Right?
There you go. Yeah.
And I think even as Catholics, it challenges us too, because it's like, people just say, well, let's just create a third category of sport. But the problem with that is that's claiming that there is a third type of person, right? And instead, it's like God created the male and female, and they're individuals who are deeply, deeply struggling. I mean, just the mental health and things behind this issue, the cultural influence among young women. We need to have a heart to meet people where they're at and to help them heal, because I can't imagine that just disassociation that's happening in their hearts. But we don't just throw them into another category, right? It's like, no, like there is reality, there is biology, there is natural law. And so we even have to be careful, I think, as Catholics, too, to say, like, are we affirming a lie here? Rather than meeting people where they're at and helping them on the journey towards full integration and truth.
What is it, do you think, why some of these women are so angry and are all in on this? For example, what is the athlete's name that fouled Sophia Cunningham in that awful foul? And she was expelled from the game, and then she claimed white privilege. Can't remember her name, but what is it with these people? Yeah, is it an agenda? Is it they're so worried about their own, what people are going to say about them?
Yeah. I think that's some of it. I mean, you look at it's like a slippery slope. Like, why is Billie Jean King, who for years has advocated for, the whole same-sex agenda, and now this is the next issue, and it's almost like they can't back down. It's like they just have to keep saying yes to these lies and promoting these lies. I think we also have to just recognize the whole spiritual element here. I mean, these individuals who are struggling or who are believing this, they're blinded to truth, and there's a deep, deep rage within them, as you saw come out in this foul, that's almost inexplicable. And I think that's where there is attack. There's really, it's in the devil's playbook. It's like he's going to attack women, and this is one of the latest iterations of that. But yeah, and I think that there's just these spirits of envy and then just kind of a toxic empathy that like, okay, I'm just going to love everybody. But when that love, and Sophie, this is why she was so good. She said along the line something like, love means truth.
Right.
And when those aren't tied, then love is just love. And there's no end to what that can mean.
You mentioned Billie Jean King, and what's so sad about that is you're not old enough to remember what was known as the Battle of the Sexes, but I remember that with Bobby Riggs, the award-winning tennis player, and she wins. And this was such an important matchup for women's sports and for women's rights at the time. And now, fast forward, here we are in 2026, and she is now siding with men playing in women's sports, biological men playing in women's sports. When she had that battle and when she won, it was like all the rage and women's rights and everything else. And here she is. How soon we forget, Yeah,
it's very disheartening. It's very, very disheartening.
In terms of your work, where do you see this? Are you concerned overall? You were, as you said, a Division I soccer player. Where do you think women's sports are going if this intense effort to include biological men in women's sports, where do you see this ending?
Oh, my prayer is it's with truth, right? And my prayer is that, the WNBA is going to have to define a woman. Like they're just forced to. They're backed into a corner. And I think the wave is shifting. So my hope and my prayer is it kind of just fizzles out and goes away, because it is so ludicrous. Because if it doesn't, right, like women's sports are over. It's like we should just have one category, right? Because if enough men come in, then there is such a disadvantage. It's interesting, like, one of the I forget his name, but he's offering $1 million for like the WNBA to play a high school boys team, and if the women win, he'll give them $1 million, just to prove the point that like,
right,
like there is a difference, and it's sad because amidst all this, women are being forgotten and being downgraded when at the same time, there is also this beautiful movement in women's sports where they're setting records of viewership and new pro teams are forming, et cetera. And so there's almost momentum in one direction, and then there's just like this counterwave in the other. So, yeah, I mean, my prayer is that it does go away, and it's gonna be decisions like this. And I think another round at the Supreme Court to make this a women's rights issue so that there can be kind of federal law surrounding it. But I know people working on that. So there is hope.
Yeah, well, there's always hope, right? Especially when you talk about team reality. Article 13, Section 1 of the language contained in the WNBA's 2026 collective bargaining agreement, Samantha, says only players who are women are eligible to play in the WNBA. The provision, however, does not further define the term woman or specify biological, medical, or gender identity qualifications for determining eligibility. So the failure to do this is what's raising the questions and causing them to have the spotlight on them, because it really is ridiculous. And again, this is foolishness. If you think it's okay for trans men or men who identify as women to play, then why don't you just say that in your collective bargaining agreement? Why not, right?
Why not? Expose the truth, yeah.
So what do you think? Why do you think they're holding back? Because they're going to be literally backed into a corner. Then they're going to have to let in Royce White and Innisfree, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. A lot of their fan base is very liberal. I see it. And I think that's because these women, or people that have this set of beliefs, that's where they find a home, if you will. I don't even know if I understand why. Mm-hmm. So a lot of their fans, like I go to these games and it's like I would be scared to bring, my nieces and nephews. It's like just the in your face pride, all these things happening. It's kind of abrasive. So I think they're afraid. I think they're afraid of losing their fan base if they make a stance. But if they don't, right, like they're going to lose their league. So. Yeah. I think they're trying to play dumb here, but essentially at the end of the day, they're going to have to say something.
Samantha, thank you so much. God bless your ministry. FierceAthlete.org. Samantha Kelly is the president of Fierce. Check out their beautiful ministry, FierceAthlete.org. We'll be right back. About this issue of men identifying, quote unquote, as women and playing in women's sports. I remember the movie A Few Good Men. Remember the line, "You can't handle the truth." Well, you know what? This is what's happening. This is why they're backing away. If they're so confident that men who identify as women should be playing on the WNBA, then just say it and say what a woman is. As that clip, that funny parody that conservative mama did. What's the definition? They can't. Because there is no other definition than what God gives us. We are male and we are female, created in His image and likeness. And once you get away from that, craziness ensues. And I love what Samantha said about Mary Hassan, who does so much on this issue. We are on team reality. Team reality. Go team! The only athletic thing I really did was I was a cheerleader in high school. And I dance. So that's athletic on some level. All right, I digress. Coming up tomorrow on Catholic Connection, the one, the only Jimmy Akin. I'm so excited. An amazing apologist. Of course, you know his great work from Catholic Answers and his many books. He is on Catholic Connection, a brand new book about the evidence for Christ. Newman Guide News at the one, the only Kelly Solomon. And then we're also going to be discussing other issues. Dr. Ingrid Tkope is going to be with us, and I believe she is with the Charlotte Lozier Institute. Have a great day. And remember, we're all on team reality, as in God's team. We'll see you tomorrow. Ciao, ciao.